Welcome to Upper Pylon 2. Our mission is to provide you with an in-depth review of every episode of DS9 in the order they were broadcast. Tonight's episode is Field of Fire, and this is Matt in Buffalo.
And this is Blair from Ontario, Canada.
And this is Matt from Arizona, and you are cleared for docking. We have an interesting one ahead of us tonight with Field of Fire, so let's dive right into it. Field of Fire, short synopsis. Gene Roddenberry is really spinning in his grave this week as Esri investigates a series of murders on the station. This is the 13th episode of Season 7 and 161st episode overall that first aired on February 10th, 1999, written by Robert Hewitt Wolf, and it was directed by Tony Dow. Guest stars include Art Chudabala as Hector Ilario, Marty Rackham as Chulak, and Lee J. McCloskey as Duran Dax. So, Matt, I believe you have the notes this week, so whenever you're ready, take us into Field of Fire.
It'll be my pleasure. Teaser. As we join the station this week, a bunch of our cast are celebrating at Quark's. They're celebrating the accomplishments of a newbie to us at least.
Lieutenant Deadmeat.
Pretty much, yeah. Lieutenant Hector Ilario. They, of course, refer to him as Ilario rather than Deadmeat. And this was all for his defiant piloting abilities. A little bit here is like, it's interesting that, that was Dax's position typically during the big battles. Kind of interesting, but whatever. They drink and have a merry old time. Late at night, Ilario is too drunk to return to his quarters by himself, and since her quarters are nearby, Esri elects to walk him back home. In his quarters, he makes a polite pass at Esri, which is rebuked. That is what everybody does to Esri this season.
I will say he's the soberest drunk person ever.
Yeah, that's true. He's a pleasant drunk guy, just a happy, like, hey, I'm drunk. Hey,
I mean, if we were playing for realistic, he'd be slobbering all over poor Esri.
Right, and I'm happy they went this way.
I'm just saying, like, it's nice to know that decorum evolves in the 24th century, even drunk decorum.
Right, and nice gentleman characteristics there. Hey, I'm going to take a swing at this. No? Okay. And then he was just having a happy evening. Well, dead a couple minutes later, but we'll get to that. So anyhow, he also shows off the pictures of his Academy buddies, wishing that they were here to see all the good work that he has been doing. Esri wishes him a good night and leaves. The next morning, Esri awakes to a commotion going on down the hall. She investigates to find out that Ilario is dead, having been shot through the heart. Cue Bon Jovi, cue the opening credits.
Yeah, he was shot dead because his name is nowhere in those opening credits, so got to get him out of here as quickly as possible.
At least they gave him something other than he's a dead body and just got an extra to sit there motionless for a little while.
I know, but I just love, it's not this episode's fault. I just love the Star Trek cliche of here's this young unknown that is really did something amazing and is really going to go places, and he's dead 10 minutes later.
They should have just given him a red shirt.
Well, the gold shirt is a red shirt in this.
Oh, I understand that, but I think it would have been a little more amusing. But it just seems that anyone can pilot the Defiant, whether you're a blue shirt, red shirt, or yellow shirt. So
or no shirt, because Kira pilots it a couple times now that Dax is dead, and I think it becomes Nog's position at some point. So,
well, we're making fun of him here, but I mean, we kind of touched on it. For given very little screen time, a character that exists essentially strictly in the teaser, I like this guy. He seems like very perfectly affable, and I guess it's effective to show that, yeah, I want to find the person that killed this dude.
He's perfectly affable. I will say, like, he's perfectly affable without slipping into Harry Kim territory, because that's easily where this character could have gone.
It was dangerous the way that it was with Miles and Julian. Like, that could have gone a little bit Harry Kimmy, but their chemistry kind of held it off from doing that, I think.
Yeah.
So,
and I mean, at least this guy was a lieutenant too, so he's accomplished more in his short time on screen than Harry Kim has.
Junior grade, but yes. what do you say we go right into the first act? Because there is one other aspect that we kind of touched on it, but the goofiness of this Star Trek cliche, I think, is in our first clip, and I kind of want to talk about that. But let's get into Act 1. So over this poor guy's dead body, they discuss the curious sets of facts. First, there was no signs of entry, and Ilario was killed probably only 10 minutes after Esri left. It was a projectile weapon shot at close range. It could have only come from a very specific Starfleet prototype weapon, a weapon whose replicator files are only accessible by a Starfleet officer. And here is the real predicament that they're facing. The body has no powder burns, meaning that it wasn't shot at close range, but all the other forensics says that it was. Curious.
Yeah, it's a good thing Odo's been reading all that Kiss Me Deadly stuff that he was reading at the beginning of this season.
So that, yeah, I do like that came up. It makes sense.
No, I'm not being sarcastic. That was cool. I like that.
Yeah. So here it's like I was kind of faced with a predicament of like, what are the clippable aspects of this episode? Like, how much of Duran yelling at Esri do I want to clip? So this is one of the first one. This is the first one I picked out where it's that kind of weirdness. It's part of the memorial process for this poor Ilario in our first clip, and then we'll talk about it.
They once told me you came from a big family, 3 brothers and 2 sisters. I thought it was 2 brothers and 3 sisters. I don't think so. You sure?
Don't look at me. We never discussed his family. Mostly you talked about the academy. And about the 2 of you.
Us?
He really admired both of you.
We should have let him come to the holosuite with us. You're right, we should have.
I just wish I hadn't left his quarters so quickly. Maybe he'd still be alive.
Or you'd be dead right there with him.
Odo will catch whoever did this, won't he?
If anyone can. We really should have let him come to the holosuite with us. Esri.
Shouldn't you be in bed?
I was about to ask you the same question.
I just couldn't sleep.
Me neither. You mustn't blame yourself, for Ilario's death.
I don't. Not really.
Then what is it?
Just knowing that he was murdered.
It's difficult to accept. The whole concept of someone killing another person in cold blood, it's almost incomprehensible, isn't it?
Not to me.
Meaning what?
Meaning that I know exactly what it feels like. To feel the urge, the need to take a life.
You're talking about Duran?
He killed 3 people. He was the host of the Dex symbiont, just like me.
He was nothing like you.
I try not to think about it. Jadzia felt the same way. She tried to bury his memories as deeply as she could. But they're still there. The victims. What they looked like.
They weren't your victims.
I know. But then something like this happens. Just the thought of someone like him being here right now.
You really should get some rest.
You're right. Even if it does mean lying in my bed, staring at the ceiling for a few more hours. Good night, Julian.
Good night.
So I think it's kind of dangerous in some of these episodes where the audience kind of will check out because why should we care about this Ilario character? And we ultimately don't really that much. So how much time do you want to see them mourning over a character that they didn't even know last week? where I think they do a pretty good job. And I think that is kind of a cliche that we've seen in other episodes.
I mean, it's a hell of a lot better than that Voyager episode with the resurrected ensign that Harry Kim loves.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
true.
mean, you earn that. You still earn it a bit more when you have like Muniz, where you do sit with him for a whole episode. Here, I see why they need to have this in the episode, but it's going to become really fakey feeling because he's in there so quickly. Where I think they do a pretty good job is they turn it on their characters.
Yeah, it's more about how it's more about how it affects other people than it is about the character themselves, and
Right.
it soon turns into more of an introspection on Esri and Duran than it is focusing on this one dead crewman that we never met before that they're all harping on.
And even the part A of that clip, it's the Julian and Bashir holding a little bit of guilt and responsibility in there. So it's like, I like that it's reflecting back to our characters that we do care about rather than seeing them go through unearned fake emotion for a character that nobody under the best of circumstances cares all that much about.
But we have seen quite a bit of that this season with a lot of our main characters, the effects of losing so many people, whether they were colleagues or whether they were nameless faces, as we saw Cisco reviewing those casualty lists over and over again. The one nitpick I would have is, quite frankly, would these more senior people really be hanging out with a junior guy? You know, doesn't he have his own friends to hang out with, especially being new on the station? But,
well, it's hinted that no, he probably doesn't, because he's looking to hang out with Bashir and O'Brien. He's looking for that friendship, so he is kind of alone on the ship. He has his friends; they're just stationed on the Lexington.
That's a good point. I would just argue he wouldn't be hanging out with those type of senior people, though.
Maybe not right away, but given that he's like this hotshot pilot coming off the Defiant, he's the new up and coming star. It may not be buddy with the senior staff, but I wouldn't expect the senior staff to like not take an interest somewhat in him.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't strike me all that bad. I mean, there's the military aspect to this, right? Like, would that senior level of military people fraternize with a lower one? But
probably not. But I mean, Star Trek's never been like one to adhere to strict military protocol.
Right, and because of that, this struck me as very realistic, because the exact same thing is happening in my workplace. I'm quote unquote a senior scientist there, and younger guys want to hang out with us to, you know, learn or just be friends. So if we're looking at it as more like a social aspect rather than the militaristic aspect, which they always downplay, I don't know. It struck me as he's a young kid looking for friends, and Julie and Bashir are quote unquote cool.
I thought the character was good. He was endearing, and as you said, he was a pleasant drunk, which certainly made you kind of like him a little bit more.
And where he was hanging out with them in Quarks, where, I mean, if you go to Quarks, you expect that it's a social gathering. There's really not those delineations of rank. Everyone's there to have a drink and a good time. That's at least the vibe that you get from that bar. And
he is young, but he was still a lieutenant, which is something, you know. But the one part that I guess there's no time in the episode for, you kind of mentioned, Blair, that there's a lot of people dying on the station. We've seen this a bunch. The one aspect of that they could have pursued in this episode but didn't is the, like, yeah, it's wartime, but this is that extra level of pointless death. But does it need to be in here? Not necessarily, right? It's a police procedural episode. This is what the genre is that they're borrowing this week. So,
and I think it's pretty much in your face that it was a pointless death anyways. I don't think they need to hammer it on you. So,
right. So that night, Esri has a dream about Ilario and one of her past lives, that of the murderer Duran, who we just heard about. Duran, scolds Esri for ignoring the fact that he is part of her and that she should perform the rite of emergence so he can come out and help solve the crime, as he knows how murderers think. She is then awakened by Cisco telling her that there has been another murder. So here's the point where I want to ask. They don't really go into it at this point or at any point. Are we kind of supposed to think that there's a possibility that Ezri is the murderer?
I never got that.
I never thought that.
Right. That's where I was like wondering, was that intentional? Did they want you to think that at any point? Because up through a chunk of it, at least, it is very plausible that she could be it and that it was Duran working through her doing it. But
I don't know.
I'm not sure.
I never picked up on that.
The possibility is there if they wanted to. That it would.
I mean, I
be very
guess. I
minor
mean,
things.
I guess it could make sense in the fact that Ezri's, for lack of a better term, Ezri's will isn't as strong as Jetzia's, and maybe Duran could overwhelm her, and it's like a split personality thing. But,
Because they flirt with the possibility. I mean, she's the last person to see him. She blacks out here, and Duran's talking when she kills him. She almost knifes the guy in the throat in Quark's. You know, it's like it was almost like a version of the story that they downplayed at a certain part.
But then when we get the second victim, she never ran into the second victim.
Right, but we do see this period where, you know, she's out of it and Duran is having a dominant part of her psyche. I bet you it was a version of the story that was written at one point, and you see the artifacts of that kind of getting rewritten through the story. But hey, what do you say to Act 2?
Well, before we move on to Act 2, I just wanted to bring up in this one too. Sorry for my dog. We've had kind of a mixed relationship with Duran in the past. We really liked him in his first episode, Equilibrium, and then I think it was more the way Avery Brooks was overperforming him in that episode, Facets. But I really like this guy. I mean, yeah, he's more sinister than he was in Equilibrium, but to me, he doesn't go as over the top. I mean, there are some points where he's a little bit more campy, but I think this guy, Lee J. McCloskey, who, did you write the notes, Matt, or did Chris? Because he comments on how cool his name is.
It's the same first name as my son, so yeah, I wrote the notes on that one.
Oh, I thought you were talking about just the fact that whatever. But I like this guy's performance. I think he works for me in this episode.
I agree. If anything, my one again nitpick was, and I don't necessarily want to call it overacting, but just when she's talking to him, you would think that she would be a little more low key in public, as opposed to having a full out blown conversation. But
yeah, but we've already established that this character is kind of a spaz.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for better for worse, the Cisco, he was Rayo Vantica-ing it up pretty much for that one. Here, I didn't love him, didn't hate him. He was just what the episode needed. So he kind of the Duran character kind of floated by.
I'm not saying like this blew me away, but it worked for the episode that it was in.
Yeah. Oh, I like his best part is when he's looking really close at the picture and has a comment about the ugly children.
I know.
I like that part. Yeah.
How could someone have such unattractive children? I do like how this kind of becomes. I know that I use this analogy often, but this is such a Hannibal Lecter and Clarice Starling kind of episode.
Yeah, and I'm glad that he doesn't go too over the top and try and do too much of that stuff.
No, but I'm just saying, like, this, young person investigating this series of murders has to get into the mind of the killer who's doing it. It's very, the quid pro quo scene is basically what this episode is.
Yes, and it was going to be in my final thoughts and ratings minimally, but this is, like I said, the episode where Star Trek decides to borrow a police cliche murder investigation TV series or murder or a movie or whatever. And they do a good job of making it their own here, because how do you make it your Star Trek thing is like, well, that the Hannibal Lecter character is one of our characters from a past life, and it's just bringing that out. And that internal argument is like, oh, well, there's Star Trek kind of making it their own.
Yeah, that's the twisted thing, is that Hannibal Lecter and Clarice Starling in this situation are the same person.
Right. But yeah, and just facets of the same person, right?
I mean, but this episode even ends with like not like the night vision view and someone having to shoot someone else like before they kill them. So I mean, saw a lot of Silence of the Lambs parallels here.
I missed that part. Yes. Yeah, exactly. So in Act 2, the next victim is a previously completely unknown science officer. Who cares? And all the clues are basically exactly the same. But there is no connection between the two victims aside from them wearing Starfleet uniforms. Ezri and Odo are now to work in parallel using their unique set of skills to try and solve this crime. Elsewhere, Bashir and O'Brien are discussing the evidence where O'Brien has an epiphany. It's displaced targeting. He sets up a demo for Odo and Ezri where he blows the crap out of a space melon, which was just a regular melon with a little bit of a shell around it. He used a rifle with a miniature transporter on the tip. It beams the bullet to right in front of the victim while conserving its momentum. I guess that's how transporters work this whole time. I don't know.
I mean, it doesn't matter. This is a cool weapon.
I agree.
So this
Can
is
I point
like,
out, though, just sorry, Matt.
no, go ahead.
So put your safety glasses on. That's fine, whatever. Step back, but like realistically, he was still shooting down range. Like they were still behind the melon. I just, had Odo been just a couple inches more over,
but Odo's a changeling. It wouldn't have affected him.
Had Odo been over a little further, nothing would have happened.
I know, but still, yeah, Dax should have been like, yeah. I just kind of thought
it was a cool effect though when the thing just kind of explodes.
Yep.
Yeah,
no, I agree.
Realistically, him putting on the safety goggles over his eyes is the same as putting him over his balls or his chest or anything else. It doesn't matter.
That's the thing that I was wondering when I was watching the scene is why is Odo putting on safety goggles anyway? He's not going to get blinded from whatever happens.
Yeah, true. But it's too bad we didn't see these weapons again because realistically they are lethal.
Why don't we see these weapons? Because these are powder, well, quote unquote powder weapons that transport. Why aren't these being mass manufactured for the Borg? The Borg can't adapt to this.
As evidence in First Contact when Picard Tommy guns the crap out of one of them.
Unless they
just regular force field.
A regular force field or they put like a transporter dampener. But realistically,
but like if they're looking for any kind of tactical advantage over someone like the Borg, this would be it, or at least a starting point.
Well, this is not to dredge up old arguments, but this is where again they do a murder episode to make it Star Trek. They came up with a damn interesting weapon that makes you just kind of think, just like we're doing. That's a Star Trek thing. And why wasn't this used in like the Siege of AR, whatever number?
Well, they do try to like explain that it's a prototype and all that. So we can. That's your thing that you have to swallow this week. I guess.
Kind of you're out. Yeah.
Yeah, but this is just like. We're in the future, we're more advanced or whatever, but we know even better ways of using horrible ways to kill people.
Well, it's another one of those things like the episode with Darkness in the Light where everybody's killing Kira's old cell members.
That was damn cool.
That was cool, but at the same, like it's also creepy like that because here you have this gun that you could literally look at anywhere in the station and shoot them from any point. So, I mean, there's no point in tracking the bullet. Like you would a normal investigation because it could literally come from anywhere.
But it turns out that's not necessarily the case. It looks like it's still shooting in a line of sight.
Well, yes, it's shooting in a line,
but it just disappears and emits a big chunk in the middle.
But what I'm saying is it could be the next room over. It could be clear across on the other side of the station.
But the trajectory, you could do that line all the way through the station to figure out, it came from 5 decks up. Yep. So, somewhere on this
Could
line.
you though? Because doesn't O'Brien name drop that like you can't trace the transporter signal on this because
you can't. But this is how they do it in real investigations. They draw a line to indicate from what angle did somebody shoot down at a victim or did they shoot up at them. You would just draw this line and have a trajectory saying, well, the bullet came from somewhere along this trajectory line going up through the station. Well, it only makes sense if on this deck it goes through this line, which it would mean that the person would have to be 8 feet tall shooting a rifle down. So let's go up to the next deck.
Great point.
There's some math stuff that they could do in there.
But
There's some mess.
too-
I still think, like, given the nature of this weapon, it would take a while for them to find out who's doing it, more so than if it was just a
Well,
regular gun.
Sure, and it's also the guy doesn't necessarily always have to be shooting it from his bedroom. Well, he
Right.
does at the end, but
be
this is part
realistic,
of the
too.
fun.
This weapon would be fantastic to counter a boarding party. All right, guys, everyone just go to your room, pick up your rifle, and just sit in your room. And all the people that start invading the station, just pick them off. They'll never be able to. Who would have thought to go to
Right.
the room to? They go,
No, everybody aim for ops and just
Yeah.
shoot the hell out of anyone who appears there.
Just make sure that the telepathic Chucky guy in the Voyager doesn't get a hand on one of them. in his-
Oh, Suitor. Yeah.
Yeah, Suitor. But hey, that's the trajectory thing was presumably what Odo's doing in his half of the investigation that we never get to see, which would be cool to see too. The forensics aspect rather than the psychological forensics.
I
that
know.
Ezra's doing.
I mean, I get why they can't do it because they want to make the focus
Yeah.
Ezri and Duran. But if I had to have a nitpick about this episode, it's like, well, Odo looks like he really does need help this week. Makes him look a little.
yeah, he's stumped. Well,
Yeah.
you find out that it's hey, I took a forensics course, murderonomy and murderology, and the way you get away with murder is having no connection to the victim and just doing like this kind of stuff. And it's like, what can they do? There's no forensics to it. So yeah, Odo would be stuck in this
Yeah.
week. It would have to be purely a psychological pathway forward.
Which is where Ezri as a counselor comes in. And no, it all makes sense.
Sure. So where did I leave off? All right. So Ezri is up pondering all the evidence here late one night and ends up wandering around the promenade alone. You may think this was going to be another dream sequence, but she runs into Worf, who does begrudgingly admit he is concerned for her safety. And he encourages her to do something to help solve this. He doesn't know what he's doing, is encouraging her to do the rite of emergence. So that night she does. Duran is out and about and walking in the room. She's the only one who can see him or hear him here, to be clear. When he does show up, he taunts her a little bit and sets her on the path to find a killer. First, she has to hold and learn about the killing weapon. Commercial break.
Yeah, I had forgot. Like, I've seen this episode plenty of times, so I mean, I remember most of the stuff about it, but I forgot about her conversation with Worf and the way that scene plays out. I was waiting for Worf to go like Freddy Krueger himself, and all of a sudden she turns away and he turns into Duran or something.
Yeah, oh yeah, that is all set up to make you think it's a dream sequence. But here's where I'll give, credit where credit's due. Worf knows that she's a Dax and she's going to do whatever it takes to get this done. So he just gives her that little bit more of like, you're going to do it. Just do it.
Maybe
And
Worf's maybe the moral of the story is Worf's a better person when he's not married to Dax.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go that far.
Wait till they hook up and then. Then
Well,
everyone-
actually,
Bleh.
yeah, at the beginning it's kind of weird, but as that arc goes on, I think it actually gives the two of them pretty nice closure.
Oh, it does. But is he stalking her, or is he? Was that creepy ex-boyfriend, or was he just literally walking around the station? I got a bit of the vibe of I'm stalking you.
Well, this is a conversation we'll revisit in about a month.
Yeah.
In this one, I would say I think it's genuine, like still caring for that memory of Dax. He wants that to be preserved. So
I think that's how it comes across for sure.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Right now, there's no evidence to the contrary, I'd say. Or he's looking to make sure that she's not with Julian during this time. Who knows? So in Act 3, Duran gets her to helps her get to one of those rifles and to hold it. And that's going to be our next clip.
I meant hold it in your hands.
Why?
Because I want you to feel what the killer felt. This isn't going to work if you fight me.
I'm holding the gun.
Stop placating me. You wanted my help, now do as I say. Put on the targeting display. hold the weapon as if you're going to use it. Feels good, doesn't it?
I've held a rifle before.
You've been in combat. It's not the same thing. That kind of killing's too random, too chaotic. This is more controlled. You can savor the moment. Now, tell me what you see.
I'm moving through the different levels of the docking ring.
You didn't kill anyone in the docking ring. Remember, you're trying to put yourself in his mind. Move to the habitat ring.
I'm there, in one of the corridors.
Good. Our killer is hunters who start hunting.
I see a Bajoran deputy.
You don't want to be in the corridors. Look in the quarters.
No one's here. A male Starfleet officer. An engineer, about 35.
Good. We have a victim. You have him in your sights. How do you feel? Truth now.
Powerful. In control.
Good. That's what the killer's feeling.
I'm not angry or excited.
You're calm. Relax.
Detached.
Now, you're getting it. You do your killing from a distance. You're cold, methodical. Maybe you're a scientist or a doctor.
Maybe. But why kill like this? Why not choose a victim on the promenade or in Quarks?
If you want to know the answer, pull the trigger. Find out. Don't think about it. Do it. Do it.
No!
Ezri, the gun isn't loaded.
Then why did you tell me to pull the trigger?
You want to know what the killer feels, don't you?
So thoughts?
I want to know if Duran is lying that it wasn't loaded, because I could totally see him just having her kill somebody just to prove a point.
Well, I think you see later on when she does load the rifle,
Yeah,
she pulls off the empty magazine, and
it's true, but
yeah, it's a good point though.
I think he knows it is, and he's trying to groom her, I guess, to try and build up to this. And I don't think he would. That would be too shocking, and that wouldn't prolong her to just pick this kind of thing up and be what she normally does. So I think it's like, nah, he just wants her to take these baby steps to try and maybe pick up where he left off, I guess, maybe. That said, in there was also, they're doing their pretty cool investigation. They were like a scientist or something like that as the murderer. They're right, or along the right path.
Someone who's calculated and detached, like a Vulcan.
Yeah. So it's cool stuff what they're figuring out through that kind of stuff. That said, I don't really have too many more clips or really any of that Jorah and Ezri interaction per se.
It's pretty much that through the rest of the episode.
It is. It's a lot of him berating her of just like, give in, do what I tell you. It's kind of that.
What I like about this, and why I consider this maybe my favorite Ezri-centric episode, is because for once it shows her not being the kind of doubtful. Well, she is doubtful in this, but she is a lot more strong-willed in this than she's been portrayed in the past. And she kind of stands her ground when it comes to Duran. So I actually kind of like what they do with her character in this episode.
Yeah, you can be doubtful, but still very competent and capable, and she shows she is that throughout the course of this.
I mean, like I alluded to earlier, I think she's pulling off the Jodie Foster thing very well.
We definitely do get a lot of Ezri through this beginning part of the season, and I think more often than not, she's doing quite well as a character, as an actress. I think she's doing a good job.
Looking at it from a critical eye, yeah, I'm coming around. I mean, Jadzia is still my favorite, but she's holding well for herself.
That's the thing that she has against her, and just it's not her fault.
No,
if you can get past it.
and I'd be willing to bet that if I got to spend more than a season with her, she could have worked her way up there.
Yeah. Even that the prodigal daughter, I think if you go back and if you can stomach watching a pretty dull, bad episode on the whole, she is a good part of it.
Yeah, but that episode, like
yeah,
this episode, I mean, this episode is a better example of that because this one's at least intriguing and somewhat exciting.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So continuing on, above Quarks, Joran, I knew I was going to do that, the Game of Thrones Jorah. Joran sort of apologizes to Ezri for pushing her, but says it's needed. Quark arrives and asks if Ezri's okay because, from his perspective, she's just yelling at herself up there one-sidedly. I would imagine she's not having both sides of the conversation. Joran has Ezri send her away. Now back to work. They inspect the victim's quarters. Again, not much here to be found except for pictures of loved ones. Back at Quark's again, Joran berates Ezri again for not seeing through the eyes of the killer. Then they suddenly find themselves in the middle of a chase as security is after a dude, the killer potentially. Ezri captures a man, running him down, and holds a knife at his neck. But Odo stops her before she can do anything. Commercial break. Should I just go straight into the Cisco scene to kind of tie that up?
Yeah, I guess you can. I will say, though, I mean, I know that they try to play it as sinister, and it is sinister, but at the same time, guy was beating her up or throwing punches, so I could see why someone would, at least pick up a weapon.
Yeah, this was, the clunkiest part of the episode, because here, I'll just go through it. The act starts with Cisco giving Ezri a bit of a talking to. The man she took down wasn't the killer. He was just an officer who illegally accessed the weapons designs. He's a collector. He wanted the gun. He's not a killer. Way too solid of an alibi. So this is the part I thought is most clunky.
Second Amendment still exists in the Federation.
Damn right.
I think this scene really served, because really I thought it was kind of silly too, was just how she herself is getting caught up in the in her desire to catch the person, and kind of letting her emotions get the best of her, including her violent ones.
But that's not even effectively shown, I would add.
I'm not saying it is effectively shown. I'm just saying that's what I think they're trying to go for.
I get that. I see, but I didn't need that scene to get that. I get that more out of her interactions with Joran, because that is taking somewhat of a toll on her. And yet there's this nagging mystery that still doesn't make any sense, that curious minds would want to discover what the truth is.
Well,
as far as this scene is concerned, yeah. I mean, I really didn't need it. Like I said, the way that she grabs the knife and holds it against the guy, yeah, you could show it as like her succumbing to the impulses that Joran is giving her. But like I said, too, guy was being violent with her. So, I mean,
and he's got 100 pounds.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's like she's a shorter, diminutive person. So, yes, pick up a weapon or something that you can use to defend yourself. It's not out of the question.
No, but what it does serve is, as we moved into the next act, it serves as an opportunity for Dax to tell Cisco what she's done, and she chose not to. So I think, I like that. I'm glad she didn't spill the beans and say, hey, guess what? This is what I'm doing here, blah, blah, blah. She chose not to do that, and I kind of like that.
That part's good. It's the thing that makes The Walking Dead horrible. They have individual scenes. Yeah, terrible. They don't know how to set up a good scene, and it's like the take home of it could be fun or good, but how they get you to it's clumsy as hell. This episode, I think, is solid, quite solid. This is like, oh come on, really? They're gonna give her that hard of a time? It's a chaotic run through the bar. She took a guy out. Whatever.
Yeah, but I mean, we move right along. They don't focus on it. Cisco doesn't overreact. It just sends her on her way.
Right. And not calling you out, Blair. I think you're right. That's what they are showing, but they don't need to show that, as she's already shown that she's not sleeping. She's doing a dangerous thing, taking the murderer out. She's handling, the murder weapons. You don't need any more evidence to show that she is all in on this. So there you go. She gets away without taking too much of a hard time from him. And Joran trashes Cisco a bit, saying he doesn't know what the previous host ever saw in the dude. At this point, she starts to realize that maybe he is too dangerous for her. Again, really, I don't, whatever. So she's going to reverse that rite of emergence, but is interrupted by news of yet another murder. But in this murder scene here, a joke provided by Duran, the talking about the ugly children, provides a breakthrough. In each of the victims' quarters, they find that there is a picture of the victim laughing with loved ones. Esri quickly deduces that this is the connection, and it must be an insult to the murderer, his emotions. There, they figure out it's a deranged Vulcan in some quick logic jumps. No puns intended. It is funny that it's, we make all the right decisions, but it's a little funny how they do it. Whatever.
Yeah, well, I mean,
all day for it.
Part for the course where if you watch any episode of Law and Order around this point in the episode is when they're going to start to figure out who the killer actually is.
Right about the time when the music starts swelling.
Yeah.
And I like the fact that they took a Vulcan, not just some, normal human or a Bolian or something like that. I like that aspect of this episode. They took something that perhaps you don't see all that often.
It's kind of creepy in a fun way, like the idea of a Vulcan psychopath.
Yeah, and this is where I alluded to it in the synopsis, but we talk about pale moonlight and whatever, the one with Cisco poisoning planets of something that will make Gene Roddenberry go spinning in his grave. This one is one too. Starfleet officers killing each other. That's a no-no. They weren't even supposed to argue with each other on the bridge of ships. Everybody's supposed to be friendly.
Well, and especially the Vulcans, who are
exactly right. Yeah,
evolved beyond humans at this point in terms of emotions and self-control.
But I do like how they gave a slight little one-liner. He later on in Act 5, but he lost his ship. He was one of only 6 survivors, so on and so forth. I do like how they gave a bit of context there, just to show that even they are susceptible to this type of stuff. I
was going to say, I do wish they would have connected it a little bit more to the emotion of laughing, because I feel like where they were going was good. I mean, that setup was good, that he was one of the 6 survivors, but, you can see evidence of emotion pretty much anywhere you go when there's non-Vulcans. So, I get the whole thing is about, the emotions freezed in time and that sort of thing, but I don't know. I think I would have liked it better if there was something about humor or laughter that set this guy off.
Well, I mean, you can connect that with like the superiority over humans, or what they always perceive to be. I don't think that's that big of a logical jump when you look at like Take Me All to the
Holosuite.
Yeah, the Holosuite episode of like what Deep Space Nine writers may be thinking of Vulcans in general. So if you kind of look at that mindset with that one, coupled with what's given here, I can make that logic.
Like I said, it doesn't hurt anything for me, but it would have been interesting.
This could have been like an episode that maybe would benefit from a Babylon 5 ending. One of the things that we talk about where they talk about it a little bit more afterwards. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe not. But
I didn't mind how they ended it, though, too. They just ended it. There wasn't any epilogue. They didn't go, her talking to Cisco to explain how she did it. It just ended, and I actually like that ending.
Again, I know it's like anti-Star Trek and anti-Roddenberry, but I do like the fact that it ends and it doesn't try to pick up on it like some kind of hopeful note. It's a very somber ending. Right,
but I think more often than not, an episode would benefit from that epilogue or denouement or whatever.
Something
where you breathe a little bit more at the end.
Well, you're talking about where they talk about the situation more, kind of explain stuff. So basically, like when they go to the psychiatrist's office at the end of Psycho.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, sure. I'll take that. Yeah, exactly.
Where the guy pretty much explains what happened the whole movie.
I wouldn't, to put a real button on it, yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing that Vulcan in a cell just saying something that ties the character up even a little bit more, because he survives at the end. So it's like, yeah, give me the Psycho scene at the end. Okay, it's going to be a Vulcan. Of course it is. Now they just need to narrow it down of the 48 Vulcans on the station, none of which we ever see. But before they even get the opportunity to shorten that list, Ezri happens into a turbo lift with the Vulcan. Duran walks over, stares him in the eye, and right away tells her that this is the murderer. Which, that I kind of like. I don't know why, but I'm like, well, clock is ticking on this episode. Why not give it kind of like a creepy way of figuring out what it is?
Yeah, I
The
like
murderer
how-
sees his type.
I was gonna say like there's like murder ESP going on. So
Yeah. So in Act 5, it's pretty much a tense kind of standoff kind of thing here. So I have one very short clip. So let's look up that Vulcan, shall we?
I'm telling you, he's the one we're looking for. Look in his eyes.
By the way, I'm Counselor Dax.
I know. What are you doing? He's getting away.
I need proof. Something I can take to Odo.
When you're looking for that proof, what do you think the Vulcan will be doing? Let me tell you. He's going to pick another victim.
Science Officer Chulak, age 97. Assigned to Deep Space Nine 3 months ago. Before that, he served aboard the USS Grissom.
What was he transferred?
The Grissom was destroyed by the Jemadar in the Battle of Richter Prime. He was one of only 6 crewmen to survive.
6 survivors out of a crew of 1,250.
He served on that ship for 10 years. Those people who were killed were his colleagues, his friends.
That's a painful loss even for a Vulcan.
It doesn't make him a killer.
But your instincts tell you that he is. Listen to your instincts. Listen to me. It's him.
Computer, locate Science Officer Chulak. Lieutenant Chulak is in his quarters.
His next victim.
Computer, where are Chulak's quarters?
Habitat ring, level D12.
So she rushes off and gets the rifle. Through that sensor, she can see that the Vulcan is there and looking up her service record. Nice creepy moment, I would say there.
it's great.
She watches him go get his rifle, and she coldly and quickly loads her rifle and shoots him before he can shoot her. I kind of downplayed that, but that's a nice little showdown moment.
I do like the fact that she literally does not shoot him until he's looking right at her.
Well, yeah. I mean, I guess that's the right thing to do. And he gets a shot off, too.
Yeah.
So she heads to his quarters to stare him down. He's wounded, not dead. Trail of green blood left behind him. When asked why he did what he did, all he says, it was logical. Creepy, truly broken.
You don't need much more than that from a Vulcan.
I guess not, but I wouldn't mind, the equivalent of him sitting there in his mother's wig, kind of a scene.
No.
Yeah.
We want the psycho scene at the end. I get it.
Yeah. So, okay. Duran tells her she needs to kill him. And she just calls in the guy
as we
the
knew
cops.
she would.
Yeah, right. With the murder solved, she reverses the right and sends Joran back into her. Yeah, all right. That's poor choice of words, I suppose. But as he goes, he points out that he is now going to be a part of her. She cannot bury him as much as Curzon and Jadzia did before.
A nice little cap to Duran, the Duran arc. That's pretty much all we need at this point.
Yeah, and there you go. Closing credits. Yeah, I mean, that is like that hollow threat of like, I guess now that we're doing a critical review, I'll look to see if there's any change of her character, but I suspect there probably won't be. Right?
We don't really have time, to be honest.
No.
And like I said, as far as the arc of Joran goes, this is about as good a closure as you could probably get.
And it wasn't anything I was even necessarily asking for, but you get it, and it's not bad by any means.
And we close off what I consider to be a very solid episode, but I'm wondering if you guys agree. So we'll probably move into final thoughts. So Blair, why don't you go first and give us your final thoughts on Field of Fire?
Well, I think as we said, opening season 7, I said my thoughts pretty early on about the character of Dax, and I felt they wasted too many episodes on the character of Dax. You mentioned the one earlier that we just saw with her and O'Brien, that cringeworthy one. That being said, I think this one was a good one. This is by far my favorite one of her. I liked how she played it, and I'll never discount her acting. It's not the actress's fault. I think she does a fantastic job for what she's told to do, and I really enjoyed this episode. I really like the concept of the rifle. I love the concept. I love the kind of detective stories, police stories of who done it, and and I liked it. It was just enough Odo in it, but it still was a Dax episode. And the Duran character, I agree with Matt. I really like how he was acted, how he was played, and I really think it came across quite well. As I mentioned earlier, I did enjoy the fact that she didn't have to tell everybody what she was doing. It was a nice little scene between Worf and her without him really knowing what was going on, and nor did she tell anyone in the end what she had done. It just ended as we talked about. So overall, I really like this episode. Is it a 5? No. But I really like it. I'll give it a solid 4.0 TR 116s.
I'll give you the option, Matt. Would you like to go next, or would you like to close this out?
I'll go next.
Okay.
So, like I said earlier, this is an episode where you can't miss it. They're taking a genre or a parody of something else and trying to do a Star Trek twist on it. And usually my measuring stick for how I review or how I receive as the episode is that they do anything to make it their own. And I think through this one, like any real meaningful aspect, they did. The murderer and their motivation was very much like a Star Trek thing. I wouldn't mind seeing a little bit more of that in the end through your debrief type of a scene at the end, but good. They made it their own. The murder weapon's good, creepy Star Trek technology, cool stuff. It made us all think and have a little sidetrack on it. And then the cliche of to understand a murderer, you have to become a murderer or, think like a murderer. Well, lo and behold, we had, again, by another fantastic chance, a character that's supremely suited to do it. And it's, again, some crazy Star Trek nonsense that allowed it. So what more could you really want? So what more could I want? I'll say it, actually. It's that I didn't like that dream sequence. I thought that was a little weird and kind of maybe out of place as the episode went on. That kind of stuck out a little bit. And then that one Cisco scene, meh. But those are not by any means devastating things, but, they kind of keep it from being like the perfect episode. So it is a very solid, very entertaining, and by and large, a very solid fifth act that I would have liked a little bit more from, but it's cool, tense, action-y kind of thing. Made it a very fun 4-star episode.
Yeah, I think it's going to be unanimous. For me, this is also a 4-star episode and my favorite Ezri-centric story. I think she pulls it off very well. And like Matt said, I'm good with any Star Trek parody or parallel of something else as long as it's done well. And for me, this is an episode that's pretty much the quid pro quo scene of Silence of the Lambs plus its ending climax. And it's done with a Star Trek twist. It's done very well. It gives a nice closure to the Duran arc, and it's effective where it needs to be. It's creepy. It's tense. It's mysterious, and there's not much more I can add beyond what you two said. But it's a solid little episode, and so I'm also going to give it 4 stars.
It's funny, if you look at the reviews, a lot of people either love this episode or they absolutely hate it. So it's good to see that I
think a lot of that's the Ezri effect. I think just a certain amount of people are just never going to be able to get over that.
Well, to those people I say, if I can get over it, so can you.
Damn right, Jedzia's homegirl here. Or boy, sorry. Oh, whatever.
It's accurate. But Matt, would you like to throw it over to yourself?
Oh, absolutely. Here we go. let the dulcet tones of me tell you about some previous episodes' feedbacks. All right. Do you want to do the email forum stuff? Okay. All right.
Well, Matt, I always love it when you throw it over to yourself. It's not awkward at all.
I really need to get rid of that music transition, so it's just me to me. I might try to remember to do that eventually.
Just like an endless stream of you.
Oh my God, you could all be so lucky.
Well, if you would love to hear Matt's dulcet tones reading your feedback, there are a number of ways to contact us. You can email us at up2podcast@gmail.com. Leave a comment on our forums at forum.checkmatefamily.com. Follow us on Twitter at UP2podcast and like us on Facebook at facebook.com/upperpylon2. You can also leave us 5-star iTunes reviews. They help out the show, especially since we are in the downslope of season 7 and about to wrap up here. So we really do appreciate those reviews. You can also contact all of us personally on Twitter. I am at mhanson0207 talking about all things Star Trek, all things nerdy, all things movies. Within the next couple of months here, I'm working on a project where I'm going to be reviewing all the Halloween films on podcasts with someone from the Nerd Party, a co-host from the Nerd Party. So as we count down to the new film in October, so all that and more at mhanson0207.
And I can be found at Medic1849, where I am tweeting about soccer stuff. Not much hockey stuff right now. And yeah, a little bit of soccer stuff.
Yeah, my God.
Sorry, Star Trek stuff.
Hockey season needs to start. It's the dull part of the summer. I can be found at Pro Sub-Zero, where I'm talking about more than likely a lot of vintage old science fiction books by 3D printing, where I'm printing a full 1-to-1 size of Thor's hammer, which is turning out rather nicely. Yeah. And, you know, it is football season, so go Bills and Steelers.
Well, thank you so much for joining us this week. It was a fun little episode to talk about. And if I'm not mistaken, you can join us next week as Odo meets another one of his kind in Chimera.
I'm Matt in Buffalo, reminding you that I am a master of my own domain.
This is Blair from Ontario, Canada. Until next time.
Quid pro quo, guys. This is Matt from Arizona, closing hailing frequencies. Docking clamps are open and you are cleared for departure.